Today, October 29th, 2025, we find ourselves approaching a kind of threshold. Yes, I am talking about 3I Atlas, the comet that has already baffled us by arriving from outside the familiar cloud of the solar system, carrying material signatures that are partly within our known chemical lexicon and partly not. We will know the details of that over the next 5, 10, even 20 years, when the detailed spectral analysis potentially reveal minerals or isotopic ratios that are truly alien to our current catalog. And that's exciting in itself. New science unfolding slowly through the methods of proper science as humanity's prism turns to let the new light through. There's this pattern that keeps showing up in human systems. Whether we're talking about politics, science, or deep state bureaucracy, it's the pattern of what we could call hidden governance. No, I'm not talking about one big cabal pushing all the strings, but overlapping networks, financial, military, technological, each with its own agenda, culture, and leverage points. They intersect when it's convenient and drift apart when it's not. From the outside, it can look like one coordinated shadow structure. But really, it's more like an ecosystem with competing instincts. The same logic applies inside science. Paradigms have survival instincts. Once a way of thinking becomes institutionalized, it defends itself. It becomes a kind of entity on its own. It does not defend itself out of malice, but because every system wants to preserve its internal order. A paradigm doesn't collapse because it's wrong. It collapses because maintaining it becomes more expensive than changing it. At least if we follow the ideas of Thomas Kuhn. And that's where someone like Avi Loeb comes in. In a way, we could look at him as a sort of emergent property of a scientific system under stress. A signal that the pace of new data is exceeding the capacity of old frameworks to process it. We have built telescopes, sensors, and AI systems that can capture astronomical information in real time. But our interpretive machinery, the human side of it, such as the slow peer reviews, the conservative modeling, is lagging decades behind. When that happens, anomalies pile up, and the system starts producing voices who turn those anomalies into narratives. Let me put a little idea here. If we look at a system and we're saying that it becomes a sort of very complex pattern in itself, it will produce information that certain voices will grab and then externalize. If we go with that idea, then Loeb's insistence and his provocation will make sense in that context. He has become that voice. He's not just challenging astronomy. He's expressing the pressure that builds up when a knowledge system outgrows itself. Whether or not there's a military or intelligence group amplifying his voice almost doesn't matter. Bureaucracies have always capitalized on ambiguity. It is fuel for funding and justification. A little mystery goes a long way when you need a new budget line. So maybe this isn't about one man or one institution at all. Maybe it is about how humanity handles the unknown. We resist, we ridicule, and then slowly we adapt. The UFO, now called UAP, conversation went that way. Now interstellar objects are potentially doing the same. We are watching a familiar dance between denial and discovery. The human mind defending its comfort zone until the evidence becomes so bright that we simply cannot ignore it. Loeb, love him or hate him, is performing perhaps a necessary function. He is for sure trying to force the paradigm to metabolize uncertainty outside the accepted paradigms and their configuration. And that's how change always begins, with a bit of noise, with a bit of chaos, and someone brave or reckless enough to bang on the door of a closed system until the hinges finally give way. But then, stay with me. What if, at its core, this object isn't just a comet in our traditional sense? Let's go with Loeb's ideas. What if this is a spacecraft of non-Earth origin, either inert or operating, silently passing through our solar system? If that were the case, what follows becomes a fundamentally different chapter in human history. First, how would we respond? We would for sure face immediate technical, political, cultural, and ethical challenges. So, let us begin with the technical challenges. Our telescopes, detectors, and tracking systems are optimized for natural objects such as comets, asteroids, and planets. But if the object is a craft, active, perhaps maneuvering, even if it's not, even if it's dormant and from ancient days of our solar system, our analytical frameworks are completely inadequate. Can our instruments detect propulsion signatures, material composites intentionally engineered, or structured features unlike rocky, icy, old metal aggregates? Probably not with full certainty in real time. Most likely not. We would face years of data gathering, modeling, hypothesis testing. Retrieving such a craft, even if it is possible, would demand technology likely decades ahead of the public programs. I'm not here talking about some of the more hidden programs. We will return to that later. So would the technology that is necessary, such as orbital rendezvous, as in kind of even getting close to the sun, potential capture, safe containment, there could be a lot of stuff on that craft that we would not like to get in contact with, and potentially reverse engineering. Do we have that? Not within the public programs, unless someone suddenly steps up and says, oh yes, we've been preparing for this for years, within the private contractors. That is a potential and a possibility. So the political and governance challenges. So who leads this decision making? We have seen enough movies, right? So the optics alone, as in alien craft in the solar system, would shatter standard policy frameworks. National governments, international bodies, secret programs, all would jockey for authority. Who will rise to the occasion? Perhaps even internal fights over who actually has the territorial right of an alien spacecraft close to the sun. Of course, we could hope for that humanity would do as in Carl Sagan's novel, Contact. If clandestine reverse engineered technologies do exist, I'm not saying, I'm not claiming, but we all know I'm not saying it is, but it is. The gulf between public awareness and covert capability would widen dramatically. That in itself would be a fundamental existential shocker for most within our society. We would face questions of disclosure, who gets to see, who decides, who benefits. So, societal and cultural challenges. Imagine the first credible public announcement. We believe this object is extraterrestrial in origin. Many people would definitely feel the ground shake a little bit. Others will, yoo-hoo-hoo, they will say, I told you so. Many will demand transparency. Some will fall into deep conspiracy ideas. The narratives on social media will explode. False, deep fake, different forms of information will for sure arise. Potentially, religions, philosophies, and cultures will scramble to assimilate or perhaps even resist the implications. Human self-understanding would shift. Are we alone? What does it mean if we're not? Do we become extractors of alien tech as a civilization? Are we pushed into becoming diplomats, or simply watchers of something far beyond us? Kind of fight or flight, right? What do we choose? Or do we simply just fawn? What if it lingers near the sun or disappears? Another question that is important to ask. Suppose the craft stays near the sun, perhaps using solar energy, perhaps hiding within the corona, perhaps in orbit where we cannot easily see it. The sun itself becomes a shield and a cloak. We can't approach the sun without burning up, but these craft clearly can. So already there, the craft has technology far beyond what we have. So how will we even approach it? If we lose track of it or it drifts away, the data loss could be catastrophic. We may never get samples, never study the engineering, never decode what it is or why it is here. Or suppose it vanishes altogether into the heliosphere or beyond. Did we miss our window? Did we misinterpret what we saw? Future generations might curse our delay. Another big question is, what if our clandestine programs are already moving? And you hear what I mean about that, right? I'm not saying potentially, I'm saying what if our clandestine programs are already moving? So let's assume the worst or best case. Some hidden programs has already caught fragments of alien crafts. And I'm here being kind, saying caught fragments. Just go with it. We are being kind here. So they have already reverse engineered materials and prepared for this moment. Very likely. However they want to spin it, they have prepared. Then disappearing of this object becomes the trigger. If not this one, then potentially another one. Not just a discovery, but a resource, a testbed, a bargaining chip. The question then, will that knowledge come forward or will it remain buried? Will public programs mobilize full telescopes, missions, and international collaboration? Or will everything be rerouted into invisible compartments? The gap between what the public perceives and what the technocrats do in the shadows could become monstrous. Perhaps even the final bifurcation. So, what is next for humanity? We have, broadly speaking, 3 paths. 1, the slow science path, that treats the object as a novel interstellar comet, gather data, publish, debate, integrate into astrophysical models, and stay within the norms. We have the expanded science path that treats the object as potentially anomalous, push for extraordinary observation campaigns, mobilize international effort, workflow changes, and transparency. And then, of course, we have the rupture path that assumes it's a craft, treat it as a treat it as an actual encounter, mobilize resources, both public and covert, prepare for diplomacy or extraction, reconfigure our global scientific and governance frameworks, perhaps even introduce some of their own extraterrestrial friends as part of the retrieval crew. Which path happens will depend on not just the object, but on our readiness to change. If we cling to our old interpretive habits, we will lose the moment as if it is a craft. If we open ourselves to the possibility, not in a whimsy, but with rigor and humility, then this object, whatever it is, might become the door, that opening into new levels of science. And then we become to the real heart of it. That is, not the scientists, not the generals, not the ones that makes all the strategies or spins into the corners of the bureaucracy machinery, but the ordinary human being. You, me. Literally everyone who wakes up, of course, everybody does that, right? Checks the news, goes to work, picks up the kids, pays the bills, and suddenly hears there is a confirmed alien spacecraft in front of the sun. How would that change us? Maybe not in the first hour. Most people would still go to work. The traffic lights would still turn green and red. Coffee machines would still hum. Life, at first glance, would look the same. But beneath that surface, something fundamental would shift. Some people would be electrified. A quiet validation that we were never alone. That all the myths, the narratives, the dreams, the science fiction had been pointing towards something real. Others would be shaken because the familiar boundaries of existence, the safe fence around our species, would be gone. For many, it would feel like the floor of meaning had dropped out from under them. Every assumption about life, faith, science, history, even purpose, all suddenly open for review. This would push into an existential review of who and what we are and our place in cosmos. There would be disbelief, denial, and an endless scroll of opinions. The algorithms would catch fire. And perhaps religions would scramble to reinterpret ancient texts, or perhaps finally find the ground that would make them make sense. Scientists would sprint to hold press conferences and panel discussions. And in living rooms across the planet, there would be a long pause, or perhaps vivid conversations as people try to understand what this means for them. For some, it would be liberation, a feeling of cosmic belonging, a sense that life on Earth is part of a much greater continuum. For others, it would feel like isolation, the awareness that we are now the small ones, the children at the edge of a vast and unknown neighborhood. The human ego, so accustomed to being the center of the story, would suddenly have to shrink to a larger narrative of cosmic life. Governments would urge calm, of course. Stock markets would fluctuate wildly for a few days, or perhaps even more. Some companies would seize the opportunity. Alien tech coffee mugs, or solar visitor t-shirts. The absurdity would match and march hand in hand with the profound, because that's how humanity copes, with humor, denial, and the occasional flash of awe. We have seen enough movies on how this one goes, haven't we? There's really nothing new under the sun, as Heraclitus said a long time ago. But slowly, in the quiet moments, people would begin to change. Artists would start painting the unknown light. Philosophers would reopen questions, thought long settled, and begin to review these ideas, or perhaps reinterpret them within the new framework. Children would look up at the sun and wonder if someone was looking back, playing new games of visitations and perhaps space-faring civilizations as part of their playbook. It would see the slow transformation. Perhaps, in certain areas, overnight chaos, but globally speaking, most likely an ongoing reorientation of the human mind. For the first time, our species would have to think not only as humanity, but for humanity. Because once you know you're not alone, you must decide who you are in terms of cosmic framework. And maybe that is the deeper purpose of such an encounter if we are to look at it philosophically and existentially. It's not about invasion, about contact in the Hollywood sense of it, but as a mirror held up to us from the stars, from the deep beyond, forcing us to see what kind of civilization we have become and what kind we might still choose to be. But again, perhaps it is just a comet. And then the big profound shift within the scientific paradigm would be that of step one, ancient objects from outside the known perimeter of our solar system. Step two, new types of elements and new types of compositions within comets. Remember, this is only the third comet detected by Atlas. We have a long way to go before we can claim new patterns within science and new patterns within the electrochemical compounds. The periodic table is still open for new exploration journeys into the unknown of the composition of our solar system and beyond. Either way, whatever's going on right now is to be seen, in my perspective, as an emergent property that is trying to push the old system, the old paradigms, into new lines of thinking, new ways of handling the data, and a more open-minded questioning to the data that we do retrieve. What point is advanced technology if we're still interpreting it within the archaic frameworks that has been put in motion and put to the table before we had that technology? If nothing at all, 3i Atlas and all of the shabuckle around it is pushing and has to push the scientific paradigm and the interpretation of data into a new territory where we are exploring, again, with humility and rigor, the data that we achieve, and not just return to the good old ways, because what's the point of more advanced technology if we're still interpreting it within the paradigms that were put forth before the technology came our way? If we want to invent new technology, we also have to work with that technology to transform our scientific paradigms. Either way, that comet is just the first step of a transformation of the human mind and how we perceive ourselves in cosmos and beyond our solar system. And with that, thank you for listening to this little podcast. And for your convenience, links below for further investigation, including a little article that will support this podcast. Thank you.